Welcome to the Humanities Team podcast with me, Steve Farrell. Humanities Team is an international spiritual movement whose purpose is to communicate and demonstrate the timeless truth that we are all one, with the divine and all life, caring for each other and the world we share, so that people's actions reflect this profound understanding within our generation. We believe that living this truth is essential to resolving the most chronic and acute world challenges and vital to creating a flourishing world of peace, harmony, and happiness. We offer transformative education programs in personal and spiritual development, and we host an annual event called Global Oneness Day. Similar to Earth Day, which galvanized the global environmental movement, Global Oneness Day has become a catalyst for spiritual activism and an integral part of the present-day global oneness movement, which represents a profound new paradigm in human culture. Humanities Team is the only global nonprofit organization working in transformational education. Since we are a nonprofit, there is no focus on growing profits or satisfying shareholders, and 100% of all revenue goes toward our work supporting conscious evolution, planetary awakening, and flourishing at every level of life. If you'd like to learn more about us or want to support our mission directly through donation or volunteering some of your time, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org. And lastly, if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review. Ross Hostetter is a personal friend and attorney who brings over 30 years of experience in conflict resolution, coaching, legal work, spiritual development, teaching, and communication to his current practice with Gilbert Mediation Group in Dallas, Texas, and his passion project, the Legal Evolution Group in Boulder, Colorado. The Legal Evolution Group helps lawyers who are ready for a larger life and find their way forward. Before becoming a mediator, he was co-founder of an AV-rated firm involved in general trial practice in Dallas. He has conducted over 3,000 mediations and is the author of an award-winning novel, Keepers of the Field. His custom-designed leadership training and consulting practice use complex problems as a springboard to an expanded view of who we might become. He is an experienced teacher, having designed and conducted numerous multi-day training courses for trial lawyers throughout the United States and Canada. And welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit, Ross. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you being here. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Absolutely. And Ross lives in Boulder, but he's down in Dallas coming in live. This is a live program, so we're real happy to be with you all today. Hey, we've got a lot of ground to cover because Ross and I have a lot of things we want to get to, and I'm sure you're going to be bringing in your questions and comments as well. So we're going to just jump right in. And Ross, let me start with with my first question for you. It says that you wanted to call this program "Creating the Good and Knowing What's Best." So let's talk about this theme. What does the law have to do with bringing forth the good, and what is the specific approach to spiritual practice, and how does this compare to other frameworks?
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve, for that big lead-in question. Let me just begin by setting my intention for this hour amongst both you and I and also our listeners. The goal for me is to bring some tangible value to someone who is in their practice is moving out of a believing and belonging setup, or who has been seeking for a long time and wants to become a practitioner, wants to take the step of actually bringing a robust spiritual practice into the world, into embodiment, to become the salt and light of the earth, like you and I have talked about. So I'm hoping for this hour that we can explore that and provide some guidance for folks that are interested in doing that, and specifically around the topic of bringing forth the good. So I thought that I would begin, to just introduce the topic by just a very brief historical overview or the context, just to say that this isn't just coming out of the blue, or we just made it up yesterday. In Western spirituality, it has a tradition that's well over 3,000 years old. It's been going on a long time. And one of the founders of this particular spiritual movement was Plato. And Plato was a mystic. And he believed that the good was out there to be found, and that if we could contemplate it, if we could tune into it and tune into its frequency, and we could begin to access it. And he saw it as these solids, these geometric forms, and we'll talk about one of the geometric forms of it probably a little later on in the program. But he had just this intense relationship with it, and allowed it to come into his being and to inform who he was. So he was kind of the noted founder of it. He had a sidekick, Aristotle, who thought that all that was a little bit woo-woo, and that he couldn't quite get a handle on it. And so that what was needed was to set up a kind of a statutory law or a kind of a guidebook of how to occur in society so that we could begin to create the good. And out of that project came ethics, which is kind of the right hand of the good, which is a code or a personal law of ethics that guides one in how to relate to the world in different situations. And that has come through to the present day. Every profession has a code of ethics. Lawyers do, doctors do, accountants do, even business people, Steve, sometimes can have a code of ethics by which they operate. And that's part of the tradition as well. There was also another big player back in the day, Plotinus, who might be considered the first big self-help guru. He was a sophist. He was a teacher, and essentially he was someone who was a consultant for people who, usually the upper class, that people who wanted to live a virtuous life, which was considered the goal of all existence, and how to actually do that and to wind these two strands, the mystical and the practical, together into some kind of a system that people could operate from. And we are still now in that question today, aren't we? The very questions that were being asked, so long ago. So that's just a brief overview, just to say that we're not going to get into all of that, but it's been running for a long time, and the thread of the good runs through everything. It was picked up in the West by the Catholic theologians, most notably Aquinas, that tried to wed it with Christianity, and produced the Western world that ultimately led to the Enlightenment values of equal rights, liberty, science. It touches all of these threads, and then also runs through the Eastern traditions as well, especially when they want to get out in the world and do something. So it's a long, deep red thread that runs through culture, runs through people. And it's been around for a long time, and that's going to help us in our conversation today, because we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, great. Over the millennia. Well, great. Let's. So thank you. That framework is quite valuable. We're definitely not talking New Age or even New Thought. So
right.
Let's take this down a level. It's one of the things you said when we were in the green room here, Russ, before the program. You said let's get down into kind of the nitty gritty of how applications in our personal life. So related to this. How can this good be brought forth in our personal life? And what are, maybe we can get into just applications you wanted to be sure to talk about.
Yeah. So I think, Steve, the way that I'd like to address that is to pull back the frame just a little bit and move now into the question of practice, and especially what we would call spiritual practice, and how the search for the good is a spiritual practice. So one thing that I want to contrast is that oftentimes when we talk about spiritual practice, certainly these days in the New Thought space and everything like that, we're heavily influenced by monastic traditions and Eastern traditions. And so we see that everywhere. We see that in the guru space, in the meditative space, and there's two basic approaches to human ultimacy. The first approach, which is the monastic strand, is the apophatic approach. That's a big term, but what it basically means is that it's the approach of negation. It starts with a premise that we're all just kind of batshit crazy, or that we are the total depravity of man. Okay, that we can't figure anything out, and that the circumstances are just unacceptable. And so the right thing to do is to reject the world, and come into an environment, and hopefully an environment that's got a pretty big wall between us and the world, and to begin a process of deconstruction of the self. So you get in, you sit outside the monastic wall. They finally let you in after 10 days of sitting outside. You come inside, and then you spend 20 years working on the parts of the outside that you brought into this environment. So you have all the desires of your body are considered to be insane. Okay, so we've got to get rid of the desires of the body, or put them under control. Your thoughts are considered to be insane. That's the monkey mind, and we've got to get control over our thinking, and to basically surrender our thinking. Our will is depraved. We need to surrender our will to a structure or to a guru. And that just goes back and back and back and back and back to a point where we are in pure consciousness or formless emptiness. Non-dual, which is an apophatic term, which means it's not this, not that. So we're seeing the world in a very clear way. And I'm mentioning this because this is going to be important to the practice of the good. The practice of the good, however, is the other strand of spirituality. It's called the cataphatic strand. The strand where it basically says, okay, we're not going to necessarily take that approach. What we're going to do is take the approach of becoming more. We're going to take the approach of becoming better. And we're going to start with the foundations that we have and make those better, progressively better and stronger foundations. We're going to start with the body. We're not saying that it's evil or bad, that there's a lot of good things that come out of the body, and desires aren't necessarily bad, but they need to be grown up. They need to be matured. Our mind is not necessarily bad, but it needs to be matured and be able to use it as a tool. Our will is not wrong, but it needs to be placed in a higher service. So it's the tradition of more, of bigger, of fuller, the evolutionary tradition that builds upon the previous to become something even better. So those are the two basic approaches, and actually they interweave around each other because there is a part of becoming the good that requires a leaving behind of certain things, and then part of it that requires the accretion of new things, the accretion of virtues and new things. So that's just a general kind of a framework. So I don't know. You want to get into the kind of the how-tos or the kind of the basic premises of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for just kind of setting the stage for this, as it were, Russ. Let me share also, this is a live program, so I invite you all to bring in your questions and comments here during the program. So Russ, I get a lot of things from what you've covered already, the framework, the historical framework that goes back to some early originators of this. And then also I get the whole spiritual practice that allows us to, as you call it, tame the monkey mind and be in this non-dual state. Do you want to bring in I know how you actually do these things because I'm your friend here in Boulder, but do you want to bring in any personal dimension of what, how you do this? Because I know you have a very strong spiritual practice with your whole family, and you're involved in all kinds of works that are focusing on the good.
Right. Well, thank you for that question, Steve. So The pursuit of the good as a spiritual practice begins with a fundamental, how we would say, just kind of a fundamental assumption about how to approach a situation. The fundamental assumption is what you're looking for, the good, is right in front of you. That's the fundamental assumption. It's not in some misty, moisty past. It's not in some far off future. It's right in front of you, right in the situation, right now. And that fundamental approach, that it is something which is seen and known moment by moment, and is the idea. And there is a development of a process of seeing the good that is right in front of you and beginning to grow it. So if we could maybe just kind of, talk, I want to talk a little bit about some other things about truth and beauty and everything like that. But if we're into the practice sort of a thing, I would say this is that maybe 5 things. But let's get those out at the top, and then maybe people could have some questions about it. So the practices are basically of the good involve, first of all, a change in mindset. The basic mindset change is to change from the idea that we're going to do something extractive in the present moment to something that is generative or regenerative in the present moment. So I could go into a negotiation and say, how can I win, and how can I just pull as much money out of this as I possibly can, or a business say, how can I just pull the guts out of it, get as much money as I can out of it, and then leave and, file bankruptcy and all that. So that's an extractive mindset. A regenerative mindset, does something different. It has the idea that there is something that is there that can be grown. So it starts, instead of a growth an extractive or kind of a death mindset, it has a growth mindset. So I'd say that would be the number one, after the general thing, that would be the number one thing that brings forth the good, to have a growth mindset. And a lot of the work that you do in Humanities Team, in the videos that I've watched and my conversations with you, I know that you have that. And that's one of the reasons I'm here on the call with you, that you want to have a growth mindset. And the idea behind the growth mindset is it puts its bet on the fact that we can become better. It puts its bet on evolution. It realizes that there are problems to be solved, and that those are opportunities, but it basically has a growth mindset, and that our job is to continue to grow up, to show up better, to clean up, and to become better at what we're doing. And that if we can continue to grow and develop, that we will get better. In other words, we can trust the way that the universe is rigged. We can trust the fact that as we grow up, things will get better. And that's going to happen in a natural way. So I'd say growth mindset is number one. Maybe we could stop there. I got 3 or 4 that we need to talk about. But
yeah, growth mindset. I love it. And also just bringing it back to these basic tenets of living in the good, which is just the growing up, cleaning up, and then waking up, or showing up, these dimensions that are just basic tenets of this journey. Okay, we've got a question coming in that's a legal question, so I want to let me just thank the person.
We're not going to give free law advice here, are we?
Derwin, yeah.
I just want to tell the audience that you get what you pay for when you're
right. Okay.
But yeah.
So we'll get to your question in a little bit, Derwin. We're going to go down. We're going to take this in a direction where we're going to talk about some of these legal projects that Russ is involved in. But we're kind of starting, as you can see, more with the foundational stuff of just this good in the world and its basic framework in this journey. So You want to go?
Maybe we could handle just a couple more, Steve. Do you think?
Yeah, please. That's perfect. Kind of create this stepping stone.
Mindset is number one. Number two, I think it's really important if we're going to do the good to cultivate a detached awareness. Mm-hmm. That's where the Eastern practices come in so well, and that's the basis of all psychotherapy, growth through therapy. That was something that had you now have it. Okay, that you now have it, and that you can become curious about what's sitting right in front of you. I would say that's probably one of the number one things in my work when I'm working with people that are in a lot of distress, when they're not in their best selves, and to be curious about them. And there's a lot of psychological evidence that when we get out of fear and anger and anxiety and everything, if we can get to the point of being curious, if we can get to the point of being able to look at something with a detached awareness, then all the higher levels of love and joy and peace begin to open up. So it's like a keystone practice to be able to see things with a detached awareness and to be able to see them objectively so that they don't have you. And that's a really important thing. And so you get curious. You get curious about like a problem. Just give you an example. Like one of the things that I do is procrastinate. Okay, so I could beat myself up about procrastination, or I could get curious about why I'm doing it. And the difference, or I can continue to procrastinate, not do anything about it. You know, those are kind of the three options. So it's the curiosity around it will lead to a lot of insight. And typically it's something that is hard to do that I have to learn, and then I have to set up some sort of a process in order to tackle. And that would be the third thing that I would think that I do in terms of bringing forth the good, which is to have a process mindset. So we are in a process. We're in a process of development. We're in a process of evolution, and we're in a process of growth. And so to not think that we're going to just instantly appear, or something's going to come down out of the sky and change things, or some person's going to come into our life that's going to change everything. We have a process mindset. And one of the things I like about our conversation, Steve, is as a business person, you have a deep process mindset. You think, what do I need to do? What kind of a process do I need to set up in order to make this organization better? And be able to see the first 3 or 4 steps in that process and begin to execute those. And the final result will take care of itself when the process is in place. So all of us have impulses towards the good. All of us do. We all want to have a diet. We all want to, have good people around us. We want to all become better people. And so setting up a process for doing that, I think, is important. The fourth thing that I wanted to say that in my own practice, perspective taking is exceptionally important. Exceptionally important. So I deal with a lot of people that are in different value systems than I am all the time. And no one is smart enough to be wrong all the time. Everybody is right, about something. There's something fundamentally right about every perspective. And to find what's good in it, what's right in it, and be able to take the perspective of someone else is exceptionally important. And so you get curious about that. And you see, well, okay, that's an interesting perspective. I don't have to defend mine. I can inhabit that one. I can see what the world looks like through that perspective. And you take that perspective. And then instantly you're in a communal or discussion with somebody, and they know that you get them. And then you can also see the limitations of that perspective and its pathology. So perspective taking, I think, is a really important thing. And what that leads to finally in creation of the good is a much, much broader and more inclusive identity, which I think would be the fifth thing that gets cultivated. So an exclusive, as opposed to an exclusive identity, something that is inclusive is you look at someone and you say, well, that's me. That's me. That anger is me. I have anger too. I'm doing that kind of closed-mindedness. That's me. I'm closed-minded, too, about certain things. And you have this inclusive identity that begins to get us into the realms that Humanities Team is talking about all the time in a very practical way. The oneness that you see, that the person in front of you is part of your being, one being, and that there is different facets to that being, but that we all are in this thing together, and we all are growing up together. And the role then of a spiritual practitioner in that environment is someone that has the ability to see what's right in front of you and then tap the rudder a little bit, tap the rudder of the ship. It's not like some massive big change. It's something which you say, well, if we held that in a slightly different way, we would end up in a different direction. There's a different, maybe broader, better way to see that. There's maybe a different practice that we could undertake. There's a different process. And so it's a process of going through the world, dealing with what's right in front of you and saying, is this something I can make a contribution to, and can I bend it towards the good? And interestingly, we have an instinct for doing that. I know you do, Steve.
Yeah. No, it's a basic, with this whole, we are all one with our essence, which is, which is goodness, or you could call it blessing or peace or love.
Right.
Yeah. So that is our basic instinct, our basic, it's our essence. So beautiful. I love this framework. The framework's all around creation of the good, manifesting the good, detached awareness, setting up a process, and then this broader, more inclusive identity. So we they're stepping stones out into how we become what you're talking about.
Right.
And you're talking about this in a general way where, any citizen of the world can see this framework, but you also bring this into law, which I find fascinating, because of course, as you mentioned, law is really fear-based, but this is more of a love-based approach to living and to work.
Right.
But let me let you unfold this, because this is beautiful, the way you're stepping through it, Ross. Well, how do you want to, as we unfold it, what do we want to go to next? Let me just say real quick to our friend here, Derwin. Yeah, he came in. He says he wanted to make sure his comment, he wasn't trying to steer this necessarily just in a legal direction, but toward just broad and general kinds of perspectives. So we're going to get to that question here in just a minute. Also, Judith comes in, shared, this is beautiful, thank you. So Ross, I just wanted to let you know we're getting appreciate affirmation statements from viewers here. Thank you, viewers, for bringing in things.
Well, we can talk about the law for just a second if you wanted to do that, since it's a topic that we wanted to cover. So what the law and the legal system does, and if you look at it over time, it basically creates a floor through which we are not going to fall. And it's, in a way, it can be seen as a repository of best practices for the good, especially the good in community, the good in business practices, the good in how to drive your car down the street, the good in how to treat your spouse and children, how to handle employees, things like that. And if you see its progression, the floor is gradually rising. So here in America, one of the things that the law did, and in our country's founding, is it took a moonshot. It basically laid down a framework that was far, far, far in advance of anything that was existing on the ground. And it said, well, let's start with the premise that all men and women, all persons are created equal. And they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Okay, that's a huge thing. And these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, among other things. So it takes this big moonshot. And the world, when those worlds were written, wasn't anything like that. There wasn't, individual rights. Try to find an individual right out in the forest. It's a construct. It's a human construct. Society was highly segregated and highly segmented in class. There was no way that there was equal opportunity for everyone. It was done at a time when people were owning people's bodies, by the millions. And so it takes this moonshot and creates this sort of promissory note for the future and say, well, let's work into this. Let's work into this. And if you look at what we've done over the last couple hundred years, we have worked into it. We have worked into it. Slavery's been eliminated. We had the 14th Amendment that did that. Equal rights for women came in. Votes came in. And we're talking all about the rights of nature. The environmental laws just came in the 60s. The anti-discrimination laws just came in the 60s and 70s. And so the floor of stability, the floor of what's included, is steadily rising. And that's a really good thing. And we assume that floor is there, but it's not something to be taken for granted. The floor is there. And the remarkable thing is most people want to obey the law. And it takes it's a polarity between individual freedoms and responsibilities and the freedoms of community. And it always tries to balance those two. So an example would be I can get a Maserati that can go 160 miles an hour. I can go buy one and I can drive one. And if I have a racetrack where nobody is, I can drive it to its capacity. But if I'm driving through a school zone, I've got to drive it at 25 miles an hour. Okay. And you do that. And so you have this constraint so that we can live together in some form of harmony. And I think the law generally does a pretty good job of that. And so when you say that it's fear-based, it does take into consideration all the stuff that can go wrong. That's for sure. It's really aware of all the terrible, terrible things that people can do to one another. All the rapes and all the murders and robberies and the emergency room visits and all of that sort of thing. It's very well aware of those. But at its best, it does something more than that. It does something where it binds people together into a contract to become better people. So what you're doing in the Conscious Business Initiative at Humanities Team is essentially to begin to bind people into a contract to become better people, to become have a better relationship with the earth, to associate with people that share those same values and enter into a conscious contract, a conscious agreement about how we're going to occur. And that is a law. Okay. The premises of Humanities, the team, the Declaration, that's a statement of principles. That's a constitution. And so all of those things would be considered law in the way that I'm using it.
Yeah, awesome. I love it because this is all taking us back in the direction of our deeply held values. And of course, I know of all the great work you're doing, Ross, especially in legal circles, to really point law in this new direction toward conscious law. We'll get to that in a moment.
Right. And I want to tell you, Steve, the lawyers are not so bad. You get them in a group, sometimes in a context they can be awful. But personally, they're pretty wonderful people.
Absolutely.
They're funny. They're good people. They show up well, and I like working with them.
Yeah. No, I too. I've worked with attorneys, most of my life, and absolutely, they're brilliant. And like all people, I mean, the beautiful thing about our work, your work, Ross, and our work in Humanities Team is, again, all we're really doing is coming back to deeply held values, and we're saying, hey, instead of checking them at the door, why don't we bring them into the room and live them at home, live them in the workplace, live them in the legal profession, live them everywhere, and create this world that we know that can be ours instead of what we have today, which I don't think many of us want to leave to our kids in the next generation.
Right, exactly. So, one of the things that I want to compliment you on, Steve, is in what you're doing is that, one of the easiest ways to get into the good is to hang out with good people. Yeah. We can talk about like these little 5 steps that I think about. But one way to metabolize something is to hang out with somebody that's good and to do what they do and think how they think. And it's it begins with values. Do we have a shared values agreement? And is this someone that I really want to hang out with? That's really the important thing. Is this going to be a positive influence? And then once that's established, well, is there something now we can do together to make that bigger? And can we agree on some practices that we're going to have? And then ultimately, can we set up some kind of a system like a business where we have a context that is going to allow us to continue to grow and develop and do good in the world?
Absolutely. Let me just on this, one of the things Ross and I talk about are this notion of lifters and leaners. And so to this point that Ross is making, where we surround ourselves with lifters, people that are lifting you up, that are inspiring, that are inviting, nudging. We go in one direction, and where we're surrounding ourselves with leaners, people that are, oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. And have you noticed that you don't do this very well? Well, then we go in another direction. So, and it is a really important aspect to becoming our best self and to doing our best work. So we'll just kind of leave that one here because it's a big one in terms of reaching our own destiny in life. Let me bring in. Yeah.
Now go ahead. Just to that point, though, Steve, we talk a lot about in business trying to find the lifters and being around lifters instead of people that are leaning. And of course, we're going to lean on other people at some point in time, all of us. But bringing forth the good is work for lifters.
Right. Yeah.
You want to get up under a problem, and you want to lift it. You have a desire. It's a drive actually to lift it, to make something better. And it's a proof of God in some ways that all of us have inside of us this desire to become better. It's universal.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So, and I know, and that's what you're a great trainer. I'm sure you bring these kinds of things in, Russ. Okay, let me get to some questions. Great. And there are quite a few here. Thank you, viewers, because we've got a good number of questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. We might need to kind of be mindful that we've got quite a few here, Ross, so that we can get to them. So this first one is from Derwin. He says, hello, Ross. My question is related to a current case, that being the recent $4.5 billion bailout of Houston-based Kinder Morgan Company. What is it about our lack of collective will that we see these kinds of outcomes where the only winner seems to be an oil billionaire? Disclosure, I live 5 minutes walking from pristine beauty where the diluted bitumen from any spill would literally be washed up. He has a second question, but let me just bring that one in, Ross.
So I know Derwin. Hi, Derwin. So the question is kind of when you look at something and the bailout of these systems. I don't know if I can really do that question justice on the call. I would say this, that from most people that would be involved in Humanity's Team, that's kind of like a castle burning way up there, okay? And it's part of a game that people that are into having lots of power and money play. They want to bail out their friends. They want to, they've been, scratching each other's back for a long time to get into powerful positions. And then when they can do someone a favor, they do. George Bush hired Cheney's company Halliburton to basically run Iran and provide all the services to Iran. They do that. So it's a club of people that are doing favors, and they give each other money, and the political industrial system is a huge, huge system. And it basically works for the people, works great for its stakeholders, the people that are in it. It doesn't necessarily work so great for us. So those, I don't really see that as something that I get massively concerned about, because I don't know that we can really do anything about it. So I think that our work as practitioners is to be able to build an alternative from the ground up, and to build cultures, systems, businesses, families, communities starting from one good person at a time, and then a good family, then a good business, then a good community. And you see life as a series of opportunities to inhabit and build something. And that will become, your legacy. So power is a separate question. It's really a separate question. And the law does constrain power. That's one of the things that it is designed to do, and to use power in a different way. But I think we're going to have a whole separate call on power and the use of it. But the good is the proper use of power, the proper use of influence.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for framing that just generally, and then just getting into a little bit of the nuance.
Right.
So the next, and I'm going to go to another question. This is from Morgan, but your friend also, Derwin, wanted to get you into a mediation role there. So just so you know, okay.
Sure.
So let's go over to Morgan's question. Morgan says, how might our emotions, memories, experiences, and behavioral patterns that we don't consider good help us to become our better selves? Also, might we consider some aspect of ourselves bad when they are really just shards split off by shame?
Okay. That's a really great question. So there's an assumption that everything is useful in its proper place. That's the assumption. So this idea of splitting off from the bad, now it's bad, it's now out there, it's now something that we're never going to use, is not really part of the practice. The practice is the integration of those things. And what you said, shards, the integration of those things and finding a place for them in a context that can begin to produce the good. So I don't know, what are the shards? Shame. Let's talk about that. Shame is a positive emotion, in that if you don't feel ashamed about having lied or cheated on your spouse or stolen somebody's money, you've lost your moral compass. And so that's a positive emotion, but to sit in this condemnation of the self the entire time takes it way too far. And so back to point 2 that I was talking about in the steps, to be able to have a detached awareness. Okay, I'm feeling that shame. What is it talking to me about? And what then can I do in terms of a process step to make something different, so that I don't either feel that anymore, I don't feel something that I've done something that I need to be ashamed of, and to begin to integrate progressively, and there's really nothing left behind. It all grows up, okay? And there's old forms of it that are left behind, old patterns, but it all grows up together. So that's that's a general. We'd have to talk about the specific issue to really drill down into it, but that's kind of a general response that I would have to it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ross. And let me go. I'm going to go to a question from Lion, who's read your novel. And Lion says, in your wonderful novel, the young protagonist finds a true teacher who becomes his coach, mentor, and enlightened teacher. Who was this person in your life? And how do you recommend that other people find their own true teacher? Because so many gurus and teachers have fallen from grace or been shown to be flawed or ego-based. What cautions should we have so we don't fall in, so we don't fall in with a flawed teacher?
So Lion, that's a great question. Thank you. Where do I begin? So I could begin with the teacher that was in my novel that became the character Moses. He was a guy by the name of Billy Finucane, who's a real guy. And his introduction to the good was really interesting. So I'll tell you a story on basically how I met him. I was in a guide training, and I was a little kid. I was just small physically for a long time. I had a long, slow process of growing up. I was a geek. I was a debater. And I was in this training for becoming a wilderness guide that was full of all these lumberjacks and people in wool shirts and big guys that won wrestling championships and 6'5" people and all that. And I was, a good foot below all of them. And so this was a military style training, old style, where the few of the proud, the Marines, were going to prevail. And that was done at the expense of others that were going to be left behind and were going to go, with their shoulders slumped forward back to the camp to be transported out when their parents came and picked them up. So I was definitely in the picking up category. And we were on a day, just this hell day. We were portaging in canoes through a cedar swamp full of mosquitoes and black flies and muck and we had one of the leaders that was just taking this crew out, just leaving me behind like you wouldn't believe. They were just faded off into the distance. So this particular guy was one of the trainers, and he was unlike the other folks. He was not all put together. He didn't have pressed pants. He didn't have a program. And he was there because he knew more about the wilderness than anybody. He was the one that was actually living in it. So he comes traipsing back. And, I'm 16 years old. He offers me a cigarette. So, we're in this swamp full of mosquitoes and, just being bit to death and everything like that. All of this muck and everything. Offers me a cigarette. And he gave some beautiful advice about the good in retrospect. So the first thing was, hey, look where you are, all right? And you're failing at this program. You're not going to make it out. We know that already. So that's already done. Give that up. give up that whole idea. Give up that. So let's just have a little objective awareness about that, not beat yourself up about it or anything like that. This is all just about being physical and whether or not you need to be a foot taller in order to do this. So it's we're just going to give up that whole idea, and I'm going to assign you a different project. And the different project that I'm going to ask you to engage in is to see the beauty. Can you see it? Right here, what's right in front of you? Can you see this swamp? Can you see how beautiful the mosquito is just trying to penetrate your hand? Can you see the beauty of the thing? And that is a strand of the good. Goodness, truth, and beauty are ways that the good is brought forward. And so that's now a practice. This is now a practice. Can you see it? We're not going to do this other thing. We're going to now just see it moment by moment by moment by moment that's in front of you. And it turned out that that was the key to becoming a really great wilderness guide. Not to be Captain Marvel, but to see the kid that's right in front of you, to see the beauty that's right in front of you, to see the trail that's right in front of you. Can you see it? Can you see it? And so that emphasis, the story ended up working out pretty well for me in the end. But that's what a good teacher does, is allows you to reframe, your current circumstance and be able to see a different way. Now, as to the guru scene and the abusive spiritual teacher scene, it's a huge problem. It really is. What we've got is a confusion of people that are decrying the ego and talking about all these paths towards states and stuff like that, and getting into some sort of a higher or elite kind of a state. All of that stuff. Once you hear it, you need to just hear it as for the tinniness that it is. It's basically an ego-inflated practice. So we're talking about all these monastic practices, but we're not actually doing it. We're talking about them, but we're not coming from them. And so a walking your talk is the fundamental thing that the good requires. And so,
yeah,
first question: are you walking your talk? And it's better to have a walk that is a little bit lower in terms of these levels that you fully metabolized. That's a better teacher than somebody that is not walking their talk and just popping you into some state experience or something like that.
Yeah, beautiful. Boy, the thing that comes to mind too here on this, Russ, is really authentic and valuable teachers pointing you, just like that beautiful experience you described where you were 16, but is they're pointing you back to your within to get, to create your own kind of, yours almost sounded like an enlightenment experience, but to create your own authentic experience, whereas, a guru where they're pointing you out this way and their path and then bringing you back for more, always telling you about the framework. That's where you get in trouble, isn't it? I mean, a good teacher will always point you to your within and tell you how you can unfold things from within, as opposed to becoming the guru figure that's always telling you how it must work and what it must be and what you need to do next, etc. Those are huge warning signs, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. So the continual unfolding is really important.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered Lion's questions, but that's a part of it. And so it's not like it's out there and far away. That's the important thing. And if you have a teacher that's clearly doing something that's wrong right in front of you, I mean, it's a big red flag. And we don't have to hang there forever. We can just drop that and move on.
Yeah. The walk your talk thing too, of course, that you need to be the embodiment of your teaching. And if it's just a talk and no walk, then that's also a huge warning sign. Let me just say, Judith wants to know, is there a way that she can hear replay? Yes, we're sending out a link right after the program that so that you can listen again and again if you wish. Also, the link that you use to register is that link for replay. So even before we send out an email, if you want to listen again, that's your way that you can quickly listen again. And boy, I shared we were going to fly through time here, and we are. There's probably time for one more question. So apologies to those of you viewers that where we're not getting to your question, but we'll have to have Ross back again soon. Let me get to one last one. This is from Johnny, who says, "Thank you, Ross and Steve, for bringing this important work forward. Ross, you are an embodiment of goodness for me, and you've served as an inspiration and role model over the years. My question is, how do we access and harvest the collective good in the midst of so much collective fear, uncertainty, and doubt?"
Okay. I think the best way to address that question is in the last 5 minutes that we have. I want to cover two things in that question. Number one, how is the collective created? How do we address the collective? So basically, if you think about how something becomes real, it starts as an impulse within you, an impulse to become good. In this case, an impulse to make the collective better or reflect better on the outside what is going on the inside. And the fact that there's a discrepancy between what you see as good and what the collective is now manifesting isn't a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Of course, the collective is just going to be a repository of what's already happened. All right, so it's a repository of what's already happened. So the good that we see, that we can see that something can be done better is really important. So the collective is sitting, as a reflection of all the past stuff, and usually that collective is better than it was 300 years ago. We can always imagine a great future, but when you take a look at it, it has gotten better, but it can become better still. So we feel that impulse. That's the important thing. Second thing that we do is we get together on calls like this and we begin to share it intersubjectively. We begin to develop a vocabulary around it. We begin to be with people that are seeing it. So that's an important step. And then there's a third big step where we begin to embody it in our personal practice and character, which is an incredible way that we can change community. We don't really realize that we are like comets moving through the community all the time. It's not like we're out of it, we're in it. We're in it all the time. We're in the grocery store, in our businesses, in our families, in our homes, on the streets, in our cars. We're constantly in it. And so how we occur in the community does in fact change it. And it has a resonance. And we can't really see that resonance that we created. But, like the old-timey traditions basically said, well, at the end of life, you're going to go up and you're going to take a look at all that resonance. And you're going to be surprised how much good that you did, that you weren't aware of, or maybe the other way around. So the way that we personally move through is exceptionally important. And then there are the final steps where we begin to build structures. Businesses, conscious political groups, things like that are petitioning for different forms of community. But I do think that it starts in that process of making something real. And at each stage, imagining the good is great. Talking about it is great. Embodying it personally is great. And then building it up into forms of community is even the final step. With that question, I do want to close with talking a little bit about goodness, truth, and beauty. They're the big three that come out of this tradition. And I talked about seeing beauty in the example, but that's the basic geometric form of it, the triad, the most stable geometric, simplest stable geometric form, and it has goodness, truth, and beauty. So truth, in this sense, is not necessarily like fact, like here I am holding a pen, that's a fact, but truth in the sense of being true blue, or an arrow flies true towards a target, something which is steady, which is reliable, that's moving in the directions that we've been talking about. So truth. Beauty and the ability to see it and create it, and proportionality, and the beauty of combining things in ways that are more pleasing, not in the cosmetic way where we're covering up ugliness, but in the way that we're building it, and from the bottom up. And then goodness is what we've been talking about the entire hour. So these three things work together as engines of evolution, as directions of evolution that put us towards the good. And back to the guru question that Lion had. You can have a very beautiful guru with a lot of beautiful thoughts, but if they're not manifesting goodness, then it's not working right. And you can see it. So they're judges. Something that is good is also going to be true and beautiful. Something that's beautiful is going to be true and good. And so those are kind of the big three, of the structure.
Beautiful. I've got some really important announcements I'm going to get to here too, but Ross, real quick, what website can people go to follow your work?
Well, you can go to Hostetter.com. That's the legal website that I have, and it has all kinds of, it's got blog materials and the stuff that I do for lawyers, and it's primarily directed towards them. But this group would benefit from it. And,
fantastic.
There's a website for the book, keepersofthefield.com. You can take a look at the book, which is basically the journey of a kid into these realms that we're talking about, into the realms of the good.
Fantastic. So keepersofthefield.com and RossHostetter.com. Check those out.
Right.
Okay, fabulous. Ross, I'm going to thank you now. This was a great hour. If you'd like to receive all of our new podcast episodes, please click on the subscribe button. To find out more about Humanities Team Transformational Education Programs and about how you can help support our mission, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org, where you can also sign up for our email list so we can let you know about our free online events and other news about what we're up to each week. And again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. Thank you.